Khensur Sangye Duma Shou. Shraddha Tsoge Chonama Chanchu Patu Tani Kyasuti. Chenye Give Sanam Kiya Drola Khensur Sangye Duma Shou. Lúc cần kéo lúc cần kéo thì không phải anh đi nhận được sự kiện just ta cái giờ thì con này thì chỉ cả chữ mà lô kẻ thì cầu right thì ta thì anh đi ra chung với colors and colors to the to look at in the heart yeah at the just the ये लेने बच्चे ना अनेक उम्र में ये से ये लान चिका शुदा बेटिना जवान के लोग शिंगो नहीं माशिमोस तभी तेरे जवान लोग जे उम्र के लोग शिंगो नहीं जे तभी you want to know what you know or I'm going to never tell you so we're talking still about the relationship between the mind and the body, and the Buddhist position is that they do affect each other in a reciprocal way. However, between the two,
the mind has a more powerful effect, can have a more powerful effect on the body than the reverse. So saying that even if your faculties, your sense faculties, may be impaired or you know, you lose the ability to use certain senses, that does not affect your mental capacity. Your mind can still remain quite clear and unaffected. So that's one example of pointing to. And then the reverse of that, which is that if the mind is affected negatively in a strong way, that can affect your body more directly. And an example is that if you're caused to experience some kind of very intense fear, and that fear is purely mental in nature, and the mind becomes affected by that fear, and then the fact that the mind is affected in such a way that it can then have some impact on your physical being. So the example that's given is that a great some incident that provokes intense fear in you can have the effect, for instance, on your sense of taste, such that you're not able to enjoy food that otherwise might be tasty. For example, that your sense of taste is altered in such a way that by that mental state of fear. And so that's mentioned in the commentary as an example of how the mind can have a stronger effect on the body than the opposite relationship. So so then the commentary, which I'm on my place, gives a counterexample to that, saying, well, okay, so that may be true, but are there also not situations where adverse effect on some aspect of your physical being can also impact on your mind? And so the example is, suppose that you lost your sight. So if you lose your sense of sight, then you can't see things. And that might cause you to upset your mind, make you unhappy. And so to give a kind of graphic example, if you're a scholar and you can't read the scriptures any longer, then that would be something that would be very upsetting to you. So is that not a case where the effect of the body, the adverse effect of the body, has an impact on your mind. Is that not so? So doesn't it go both ways? That just as the mind can have a strong impact on the body, can reverse also not be true.
That is any that is killing into that. That is uncertain between us.
The yoga
issue
is another concept.
that is Gyumed, that do a year jump. Hong Kong young the top key any you do a maris. Hong Kong young the top key you do a maris. You maris. No young but he can't change. Yila young Yangi Mila Yamba Chen Chen Yila Yangi Shenshi Yangi Tichi Yilu Duais. What is Yamba Chen Chen Yila Yangi Shenshi Yangi Juzuna.
양식 좀 말했대. 그 명왕 있잖아. 모습처럼 말해. 이제 얘 제발
이 양의 신시 중재가. 이만 양발의 때는 양의 신시, 근데 양의 신시. 이 지게도 손에 아니 이 제를
맞아. 그 모습 좀
아니면 다들 그 일을 이만 양의 또 일을 양의 신시 중재 이 양의 이 이만 양의 또 지게.
라드와. That the land marry.
Land.
제가
이 land를 이만 양과 이 겐제네.
겐제를 맞죠.
겐제네. 이라 양의 신시 중스. 이는 양의 신시 중스는
다들 이 로마에서
양의 신시 중스. 양의 지제게 통하는 이 이루양 이루사. 그다음에 근데 이 양의 중스나. 이만 양의 또 이를 양의 신시 중제가. 이바 지게 통하는 이를 양의 제가. 진짜 디아파이 가치를 친. 몸이 친. 이제
아니 양의 되게 누가 때문에 이럴 그 양의
양의 일을 좋아해.
제가 이 생기는 친구와
네, 생각보다 일을 들어가. 이 이만 양의 이게진 얘가 양의 신시 아니 양의 신시 무슨
I'm not sure I understood what the text is saying, but I believe the answer, this is meant to be the response to that, which is saying that the loss of sight, which is the physical condition, can be a contributing factor. Again, it's a condition which prompts the sadness, sorrow, feeling of despair at the loss of the sight, and then that despair is then what affects the mind. But the loss of sight itself is not the direct, does not have that direct impact on the mind. That's the best that I can make of words.
칼라 신고 칼라 미신을 붙이기 미신을 꺾기 다 뒤에 열봐 공부 양배 또 영어에 Noya Yarba,
Noya.
Ongo, Number 30, number Chai Yarba,
Right.
Yarba,
One when you're out there.
on the younger 30,
Super one with this. Big,
Maria, Nigo only young Yanti, some dead.
I didn't know what
Oh, you only have it is similar to me.
Seven. You have also check.
Oh, that is just the you only have it to me, only have it to similar.
Okay. Exactly.
And you the no, you want to only the on the river Chennai, you live at the Yarba,
Got it.
and never met
Never made.
you. Never met you.
I think you did it. Oh, was it? Look to your mouth.
Most my business,
Can't say. Right?
the engine, so candy,
Oh, the one with the number.
candy, Yarba. Lady to get the Jiben, to Yarba. Can't say, but Yarba, isn't it? I need to
Never mind.
that's done. Ungolana, Yamna, Yulu, never.
My county, not just.
I Yulu, never Juna, only Yambe, Yam never used pay. Yulu, Yamma Juna, Kitoji, only English. That is that the kind of only read on you think that my each. You the only thing that it is. You can caress in you never to know. Only never is. Only never to know. You never doing never young. That's a key. Only the you so you to charity is. Only never to know you talk to be younger. You don't look younger. You pay able to procure the become only here.
So this, we had this phrase yesterday, being invoked again, which say Lobsang means that one of the two, either the mind or the body, may or may not have the ability to adversely affect the other. Lobsang means to literally means to reverse it or to alter it in a significant way. Lobsang means that if the mind can affect the body, then the mind is that that cause that can adversely affect the body. In the same way, body can also be a condition or a factor that adversely affects the mind. That's what the discussion is about. So how do we evaluate those two, ways in which one can influence the other? So then there's this phrase, Gyumed. Gyumed means something that is extraordinary in the way in which it can affect the other. So that's kind of the distinction that's being made here. And it's saying that while the body can affect the mind, and the mind can also affect the body, we can find examples and instances that exhibit that relationship. If we consider which one is stronger, which one has a more powerful effect on the other, we would come down on the side of the mind. The mind is an extraordinary factor that can affect the body adversely, but we don't want to give the same degree of influence to the body. So the example was given that if your faculties, whether it's your vision or whether it's your sense of taste, there's an example in the text Saying if you eat something that tastes terrible, that can affect you mentally. If you lose your sight, that can cause you to become very upset, feel sad, very deeply saddened because of the loss of the ability to use your sight. That sadness is a mental body that is imposed on the mind by the body. The one way to distinguish between the degree to which the one affects the other is that while the body can affect the mind, there's not, and it's not universal. It's not always the case that the body will affect the mind, or you can escape the ability of the body to affect your mind. But the other way is more, the causal effect is more direct, and that just by having a very strong effect on your non-physical aspect of your mind, that can automatically, in a way which is unavoidable, which is certain, can impair, can have some effect, some deleterious effect on your body if it's if it's that type of mental state. So an example to illustrate the relationship of this extraordinary kind of affective aspect of a cause is the example of a lamp and its light. So the lamp and the light have a very close relationship, with one depending on the other. However, the lamp is the governing factor in relation to what quality its light takes on. So if you add more oil, or if you make a better wick, or the light can become more intense, and the reverse is also true. That if the nature of the lamp is diminished, the capacity of the lamp to produce light is diminished, then the light that it generates will necessarily be diminished. And so in this example, the lamp is that extraordinary type of factor that can influence the thing that it's related to, but the light does not have the same kind of influence on the lamp. Just have a little bit of it. Sappiamo una ciglio che ci cercava, meve che cercava, da molto tacco, da pawan di che tu è, lungo o pawan, super che o pawan. So it was mentioned earlier that there are certain passages, scriptural passages, in which the Buddha is identified as having described a relationship between the body, a mutual relationship between the body and mind. Pension doesn't have it. Pension doesn't have it. Pension is mutual. Doesn't have means that one can affect the other. Each one can affect the other. So that seems to be saying that Buddha was acknowledging the body's effect on the mind. Then the commentary here makes a distinction. So in what sense did the Buddha mean that the body can have effect on the mind? And so the commentary here, it says, so there are forms of awareness that are related to the physical sense, mainly the five senses. Right? Five senses generate five types of sensory consciousness. But consciousness itself is mental in nature. It's not physical. So what the entity that is directly able to affect then the purely mental aspect of your mind consciousness does not arise in relation to any of the physical senses. It has its own faculty, which is also mental. So the mind consciousness is affected by the body indirectly via sensory consciousness. So the sensory consciousness that arises in relation to the faculties that are physical in nature, that is what has a direct effect on the mind itself. And that's what the Buddha meant by saying that the body can affect the mind. Direct effect only comes from something that is also mental.
That is what we want to be 30 years.
Mijay.
Mijay Chesma, Telo, Kentosuna.
Okay.
So, we want to be issue there. We go on with the issue.
Yes.
Issue,
Big one was in the big seven.
yeah.
Big seven, the one was it together.
Marla, we each Yiruchi Arba, we go on with the Yiruchi. I hear Javaya.
Yes, Sam Koran, one would be we do jet to
You are jet with that. He Shabati. Oh, Mugati. You must think we are. He on Nico on the Yiru can't also. Can't do that.
Can't talk condition. Can't talk.
I think you did about.
No,
Get it.
can't talk about the kitchen in China. Can't talk.
Lady.
Can't talk. He is the
This is the Homebook for the Yilu, most candle that
That's all.
yes.
So then now I think we're getting into a debate. So the debate is saying that, the interpretation of this passage was that the physical faculty is not able to affect the mind directly, right? This is what gets of the text seems to be saying. So then Gyumed says, well, consider the following. If you have this eye consciousness perceiving a color, which is an object, then that object is there's a kind of there are four kinds of conditions that Buddhism. Mikken means the condition of being an object for a consciousness, and that's a condition. So the color is that kind of condition, Mikken, objective condition for eye consciousness, right? Clearly so. And then following that sensory perception, which is aconceptual, which is pure data, sensory experience, then that can be followed by a conceptual mind, which becomes aware of the fact that you had that sensory experience, right? And that conceptual awareness is purely mental. That's mind consciousness. It's conceptual. So that mind consciousness, which is conceptual, can also have the color as its object. Can that color, then also not be something that is responsible for the mind consciousness that is contemplating that color, holding it as its object as well, right? So if that's the case, then does that external object not have a direct effect on the mind the mind consciousness that is grasping? That's one instance. The second instance is that you have an eye consciousness, right, which is mental, that's holding the sensory consciousness, holding the color. And that sensory consciousness that holds the color has a physical faculty, which is the inner condition that enables the eye consciousness to arise by perceiving the outer object via that faculty. Following that sensory experience, just as then the mind consciousness, which is conceptual, can apprehend the color as its object, can that mind consciousness not also apprehend the eye faculty and recognize that the eye faculty is an integral element of that sensory experience, and therefore cannot that mind consciousness hold that eye faculty as its object? Both of those are physical things. The color is physical and the sense faculty is physical. So are not those physical things then able to have an effect on purely purely mental element of our awareness in that sense? So that seems to be going counter to what how this passage, scriptural passage, is interpreted by Jason. So just that's being put out for your consideration. Just repeat up with some of it. Thì tăng mà nghe mà tập bên mà tu được rồi. Lu nói đến cái gì mà cả cái rồi.
Nhưng mà đúng cái chỉ về cái bà sẽ
Tất cả qua cho bằng rồi. Sorry, I'm not finding words.
Jadi malum juga bahasa terima Krishna cipta. Jangan ngaji mereka tuji bahasa Islam. Jangan ngaji mereka tuji apa.
Mereka tuji apa?
Jangan ngaji mereka jika bahasa Islam.
Ni mà thì nghe là thì có thể kêu thì
Long cái như vậy là những cái phong cách như thế nào?
Ada có chỉ có anh em cả. Dùng được. Dùng cái gì?
방금 자중 치료를 등치지. 전자상 예술기 세시가 예술기 자중 상에서 있어야 될 친구.
지금 절대 계시 땀 먹는 빼면 두고
Tadi terima kasih. Tadi memang bersungguh juga. Tadi bisa menjadi. Jadi, tadi macam jangan kalau sudah Gyumed kunai komba me di Gyumed mere chis leverga tadi tende Gyumed ora mere tende inga tadi ya Gyumed yene yang seni kombe tulan di chine kami tujuh dia mani se ya tadi
Gyumed no povasi yang kami tujuh So we're going to say goodbye to this subject and go to another one. So the first main subject, which is covered at length, is that there are no past lives. You can't prove past lives. Therefore, you can't prove that it's possible to cultivate spiritual qualities over an extensive period of time that covers more than one lifetime. So there was a significant section of the root text which is addressing that, meant to refute the materialists and at the same time prove that there are past lives. And the essence of that argument was mentioned yesterday, that every consciousness is preceded by an earlier consciousness. So then there's a second significant topic that relates to the mind. And that is, even if you were to acknowledge that there are multiple lifetimes, there are limits to how far you can, how well, or to what extent you can improve your mind. So that you can't, the implication is you cannot become enlightened because your mind is not capable of becoming enlightened. That's the essence of it. So the mind cannot develop to the highest degree that is suggested by cultivating the path.
이거 다음부터 이까지는 수지치 목표 등을 뭔가 탈취의 기분인데 그러다 또 상가스 정말 그걸 텐시바스도 그걸 텐시바스 다 담붙이 때문에 그래서 수지치고 담에서 뭔가 탈취의 그러다 어디에서는지 담에서 뭔가 탈취면서 깨어났지 담에서 뭔지 말이 깨어났지 않아요. 또 뭔가 탈취면서 뭔가 탐에 되었지. 다시 뭔가 깨어는 그래서 깨어났지 얘기하면 탐에 되었지 않아요. 다시는 뭔가 탈취되지 않아요.
So, among the four attributes that follow the assertion that the Buddha is an ultimate spiritual authority, among those four attributes, the first one is he is the one who's desirous of benefiting the world. That was described initially as the unique cause that is one of the first conditions that lead ultimately to his enlightenment. And by the way, among these four attributes that are taught twice, one in the forward or the original manner, and then again in the reverse manner, this first attribute of wanting to benefit the world covers, there's about 300 verses in the whole chapter. There's almost first half of the chapter is just about this first epithet. And then the second half of the chapter, most of the chapter is also about this epithet, but as a means of teaching the Four Noble Truths. But in this first section, what's essential is that the initial argument is the Buddha became a spiritual authority because he cultivated compassion. So, and then that phrase, because he cultivated compassion, implies that he cultivated it over an extensive period of time, number one, requiring multiple lifetimes, and number two, he cultivated it in a manner that it was taken to its highest level, meaning enlightenment. So there are two kind of premises of that argument are that there must be past and future lives in order to be able to cultivate it in such a way. And the second premise is it must be possible to develop the mind to its furthest extent, to complete its potential to become enlightened. So that second premise is the one that I think we're going to begin to talk
about. 내가 저 동물과 수의장 감에도 태워니 밑에가 방가다 스타트바디 저와다 싫어도 또 중세 공대 켜가 주네요. 가져와 세티티가 Samaritan dollar pinch was the watch. Embarrassed to share the sharing. Other thing you take out no congress, combatting age, celebrate, start and butcher, so combatting age. Even the tomato we share combatting, do it another, do it a meeting, soon. And a combatting that it is Javiva. Or that is just in a that, Javatan Siati. Niva Javani, Javatan Shirla, so far you say, Mumbai, a Java to Junayam, taking the Ranchi the Ken, Hamidu, Miduti, Pena, Chonga, Mumbai, you say Java to Junayam, Hamidu, Java, she her non-power, Miduva, Shirmus, Ati.
So I apologize. I don't know the exact verse number for this next topic, which is a major new topic. So if somebody can find it, and please let us know. But in the commentary, this section is identified as even if it's possible for a person to engage in spiritual practice, repeated spiritual practice over multiple lifetimes, nevertheless, it's not possible to develop one's mind, one's spiritual qualities to an unlimited degree, to the degree that is exemplified by enlightenment. That the argument is that's not possible. So this part of the Pramanavarttikka's text is meant to overcome that objection. So the first part of it is to introduce this kind of criticism or this argument against the claim that you can become the spiritual authority by cultivating compassion, and not only compassion but also the quality of wisdom. So the argument is described as follows. Then sympathy, the word zewa is not the exact word for compassion, but it means compassion, and wisdom, etc., meaning all the other spiritual qualities. You can meditate on them, and they will acknowledge, the opponent is acknowledging that if you meditate on them, even just to some degree, they will increase. You can increase your compassion. You can increase your knowledge, your wisdom to some degree by practicing. But Chechen means a limit. Deva means that the mind has only a certain limit to how far it can be developed. And so it's not possible to go beyond some sort of imperfect limit and become developed to its limitless extent, which is the means that's referring to the Buddhas. That's not possible. That's the argument. And then sort of some examples that are meant to illustrate the limitations upon the mind are similar to the physical attribute that an athlete can train himself or herself to jump farther, or to jump higher. That you can train yourself physically and become a better jumper, and jump farther or higher, but you can't keep doing it and just keep going higher and farther. There are certain physical limits that beyond which you could not improve your ability to jump. So that's one example. Another one is the same thing, that water can only be heated to a certain level. We heat water to boiling point, and then it will evaporate. Verse 121. Okay, so that marks the beginning of this discussion. And then, so these two examples are actually examples that are addressed in the verse and saying, well, those are true examples of limits on physical things. They are not indicative of the mental limitation, is the Buddhist wisdom.
that's it. That's it. chung 것에 그때 밑에 버리겠어요. 저가 시럽이 때 버리겠어요. 그지 참이 비교해야 돼.
그래서
추주기 추주기 때인지 추가.
그래서
추주기 때인지 추이 그거가 추기 저기 그때야 태수네 땡고 많이 줘 추기는 그게 추기야 그 타부 제수네 타부 제수. 그래서 탈배 그샤는 강구가. 그 매일 시기를 그래야 한다. 저기 그때 तति मासे कुत्तेंदी रेडी आया फेंक दी चुप नहीं हुई नो तें मीटिंग करी चता जवादा शेरफ सिंह की थामे क्या यार तें मरी कुत्तेंदी तमस स्ट्रक्चर ये तंबू तबो चीज की तेंदी चुगा सिंपल 주 그때 야 패스니 주도 만나 감 때니 그때 봐요 말해 땐 많이 돼야 그런지 그게 알아 다시 싫었다 저번에 그때 대해서디 스템 세리 담는 게 그래서 그때 군수니 세리 기라든지 그게 세리 많이 돼요.
So the logic of what the Buddhist arguments is consist of is as follows: that there is the relationship of attribute and then the or quality and the thing in which the quality resides. So in the case of heat, heat is here a quality of water. Water is the entity in which the heat resides. So the water can be heated, the water becomes warm. The warmth is a quality of the water that's not the water's essential nature. So no matter how much you heat the water, right, and make the water hotter, the fact of the matter is that the water, that is the medium for generating the quality of heat, is not a firm subject, meaning that at some point you heat the water and then the water is going to just diminish, and so the quality of heat will not have any medium for it to be able to be retained. Also, there are limits to how much you can heat the water. So this says then means the substratum or the basis or the attribute is not firm, is not stable, right? But in the case of loving kindness or compassion, spiritual qualities and wisdom, right? Those are the attributes, and the substratum or the basis that they are related to is a mental entity, mind. And mind is a quality of that the essential qualities of the mind are that it is clear, lucid, and that it is has the ability to perceive or to have awareness of some object. It's the essence of mind. So these qualities, because they're related to a firm, so-called stable basis, then as much as you cultivate them, that mind will support them and allow them to increase as much as you can.
그때가 다도 괜히 대추기 내가 많이 봤다스 그때 주들이 아미도 되게 재미진 거 예세디 다도 괜히 대추기 내가 많이 봤다 간네 이체체 나 추기 다차부게 되지 맞다 한면 단지 되기나 네 net chuti kam duba chuti tanje betene kanje te chuti yal chap chap jai mutangati and really are paying to the market to be and Mama to be a Chong Dina, better better Jenny and better Gamma Chong Jaya, the day teacher name. From better Maja Jenny put on Chongyaji, better Kunga Jenny, better Majena, put from Siam. Better Maja Jenny and cook to get from Yamata. Better Chang better Jenny Chunga. Imagine good younger, not just a family to pay in my no. They do German to the there's a Jampa, German, Chungi, the young that's the same thing. Hong Kong and bedroom maturity.
So then those two examples of the water being an unstable basis and the ability to jump not having a stable basis are further sort of explained or clarified, saying that, as everybody knows, that if you boil water, the water will eventually disappear. And so the heat will not be able to be sustained or increased beyond a certain limit, means beyond the point at which there's still some water available to retain the heat. Plus the heat itself, it cannot be heated beyond a certain point. So in that case, the water is an unstable base. In the case of jumping, we generally have the idea that there are limits to our physical abilities to jump. But what the commentary says is a little bit different, which is interesting. It says that the ability to jump requires you to train and to engage in something continually, right? That the effort and the exertion and the training process is necessary in order to be able to somewhat improve your ability to jump farther or higher. However, if you let off that training, there's no way that you'll be able to retain the level of the ability to jump that you may have even attained, or unless you continue to keep training, your level of skill is not going to remain. And as we all know, it's not part of the argument, but you don't do that for so long. But the point of it is that the ability to jump a certain distance is dependent upon the physical effort that's involved to engage in that action. And that if that physical effort is not sustained, the ability to jump that distance will be lost. That's not the case of the mind. That's a very interesting kind of notion, which we'll get to.
That is same dilemma is community theology careers is same donor. There was a share of church, then by India, same series on the Rangi, the Mama, Umbale, churches.
Don't do that way.
Nivala, Dorten Banis, there was a share. So, lot of this church. Then by India.
Whatever way. Why? Church and then by in the same setting, it's not on the Rangi, the Ganama, Umbale, church. You get him on those. Like you really do. Dog and dog, go and eat them. So, over to the same running money to do it. So, then here is the presentation of how the mind is different, right? So the rejection of the idea that there are any limits to how far you can develop your mind. So this is a brief presentation of what the Buddhist position is about the nature of the mind. It says, qualities such as compassion and wisdom, take them as a subject, right? They have a firm basis. The firm basis means that they are fixed in the mind. The mind is where they reside, right? So by their relationship to your mind, which is this serik means this luminous and that awareness. Serik is the essence of the Buddhist term that describes the essence of the mind. The mind is luminous, means that it can see, it sees things, and rikpa, and it apprehends them. So it gains awareness of things. So that quality of the mind is such that it constitutes a firm basis. And how so? When the qualities such as compassion and wisdom are then associated with that entity, that quality of the mind, then so there's a continuum. So ringdra means same class of thing. So saying the first quality was great compassion. So we're not born with great compassion, but we have the ability to evoke the essential source of compassion, empathy, and then that quality can be continually cultivated, refined, improved, made more unbiased and expansive and all-inclusive, and then it eventually, by cultivating that first quality, then it is the same quality of that original compassion raised to a higher level. So that's the same. That those kinds of qualities, and then when you do that, as it is associated with the mind, then it can improve. And it says each one of those moments of those qualities, such as compassion or wisdom, you put forth the effort, the mental effort, to generate those qualities. So it's not like the only time you can have compassion is when you make an effort to generate compassion. And when you release that effort, then your compassion will somehow, weaken and go back. And then if you want to generate compassion, you have to start all over again and create compassion again from the very beginning, and then develop it as much as you possibly can. And then when you stop making that effort, then you lose whatever you gain and it diminishes. It's not like that. It says, as you cultivate those qualities, and whatever level of development that you attain through your effort, that's not lost. And so when you reapply yourself, that whatever quality, whatever ability, whatever good aspect of compassion or wisdom you develop, it will come automatically to whatever level you developed it. And then when you reapply your effort, you'll be able to take it higher from that point. And then that point is, when that's achieved, it will not be lost. So when you reapply yourself, that level comes naturally, and then you can continue to develop. So that's a claim about the unique nature of the mind and how it can be developed to an unlimited level, because it's not subject to a specific form of effort to initiate it in the first place. Whatever level you reach, that level is retained, something like that.
tendency, atau terhirupti tendency, seritam tinggi, rangka tendency seritam tinggi, itu atau terhirup kerja kondisi ini, kaya kondisi seri, seri itu kondisi ini yang dia ada, tendency itu, kemana dia nak tendency, cuti ini. Jadi tendensi jadi apa itu cuma orang tendensi mangas di sana, tendensi tinggal. Tapi insan tadi itu jadi itu itu jual ini juga, ani ada tu kami tiada is.
Another point is that the basis or in which those qualities adhere is something that it too is inextricably associated with those qualities of compassion and wisdom. So as they adhere in their substratum of the mind, that mind is such that it is referred to as this firm basis. Firm basis meaning that it is not subject to diminishment if and when you leave off your effort, or it's not subject to diminishment in the way water is when you heat it, it starts to move backward. You retain the essential quality of the mind as those attributes, spiritual attributes, are being cultivated, and so you can do so until you perfect your mind, and mind will enable you. It has that capacity to be developed to that limitless extent.
Tadi yang cadang tu kami tu pergi sekolah. Ini cadang ini dia disediakan jangan lupa. Tak cadang ini ani rang itu kita kewa cakap dia. Kami tu kewa di siapa ini? Lepas itu kun sambutan tam dan lepas kita berapa? Sedang yang kita berapa? Sedang kun cakap rang bagian mata berapa? Rang kia cakap. Di sana jadi sedang itu kami tu kia itu. Kami tu
You can think of it another way too, which is not the positive way. That anger and desire also have a firm basis in your mind. And if you are so inclined that you repeatedly cultivate, right? You allow yourself to develop desire and or anger, then that anger or desire will have the quality that they can also be increased to perhaps an unlimited extent. And even if it's not to an unlimited extent, they can be, we can all attest to the fact that, maybe not all of us, but some of us are such that our anger or desire is instantaneous. It occurs naturally. Right? We don't have to make any effort to develop desire or anger. So these are points that lots of Oh yeah. Okay, good.
Tadi Jada Jada Shidan then said the Santamari. The Jada Shidan Yuti Categories, who tend to the city to take the lost. Native Muslim to very good. The Jama to see the Jama and the person teaching each other. Then the Jashi, the one should discuss Native Muslim to get the chair. Native Muslim to very one Amit the day. Unje the Sana Juru Inte. Sana Juru Inte. Using the Jama and the person change each other. She said, Penna to Jashi. The Jadi conversation there. Come the generation, Petun Madiba. One should do younger, but Petun Madiba. Come, young man that was in each other, Chabala, in each other, Petan Nandi, Jason, the introduction to the dinner sheet and I made the share of the Queen and the Betty Jamal and the Nandi Gia to such a Calama, Betty Jamal and the
So this is an interesting formulation. There are two kinds of knowledge: direct perception and inference. Normally, when we think of direct perception, we talk about sense perception. Sense perception is a kind of obvious example of direct perception. There is also direct perception that is the yogi's direct perception, which is best form of direct yogic perception is the transcendent realization, direct realization of selflessness, for example. The direct realization of selflessness in a state of one-pointed meditation in such a way that it's not mediated by any kind of conceptual image, and you perceive the object directly, then that's called a direct yogic perception. So that if that's achieved, you would become an Arya. That's the divine quality of attaining the status of Arya. So this argument is there is such a thing as direct yogic perception, the direct perception of a yogic awareness, direct realization. Why? Because it's possible for the mind to perceive that kind of object, selflessness, in a serikimo monsuki kitchen right. Serikimo yes, right. Nenju monsuki put into goddess, yeah, tamit to the Giarva, Serikami to the Giarva, or the Kumuna, unnecessary. Or so when you're meditating on emptiness, to meditate on emptiness properly, you have to have the correct inferential understanding of emptiness, right? And then that inferential knowledge of emptiness is conceptual over time, right? You have to develop one-pointed concentration with that as your object. And then you have to cultivate that wisdom, vipassana, in relation to that. And the question is, is it possible to raise that conceptual understanding of emptiness into a direct realization? So the argument is that you have to cultivate that conceptual understanding of emptiness in such a way that you're improving the nature of your awareness of it, your wisdom of it, However, saying the argument is if you do that, you can develop that conceptual understanding to the level at which it becomes a direct realization. Once it becomes a direct realization, then there's this phrase of repeated practice is necessary, right, in order to improve that realization. So I'm saying as you improve that awareness, at some point you can develop a form of direct realization which does not require you to rely upon some repeated practice in order to bring it there, because you engaged in this process of spiritual development. So the argument is like that, similar to what we're talking about here. And then it says, use this as an example, as a sort of concordant example. Take, for example, desire. So desire is something that we don't have to make any effort for us to manifest it in a direct way. And that's evidenced by the fact that we have cultivated, so to speak, that quality in the past. So therefore it serves as a useful or valid example to say that it's possible to reach the point at which your understanding of subjects such as emptiness can rise to the level of a direct yoga. That seems to be the point.
Then, joining the conversion, there is a meeting to be Ajumbe Yuda, Chageta, Chajan, Chabata, Mituba Kumbala, Yiloti, no Nandi, Tunisha, Jessa, Tajingala, Chage, Nandi, Chabajan, Chaban, Nandi, Chabajana, Chabajana, Chabatan, Mituba Kumbala, Yiloti, Nani, Nandi, Yilus, Yilunandi, Mituba Kumbe, Tashitamke, Yubich, Chabakun, Mituba Kumbe, Dignity, Mituba Kumbe, Dignity, Ni Rani, Karasu, Tashitamke, Yubich, Senat, Senat,
That's
Ati Chapa Jan, Chapa Jan, Ni Chapa Nandi Kibukas, me do about Monday, Delia. We do but it to the Loba Yilet attention. Lobe Dignity
for a few more.
Locally, such a give each other the younger, but the Kumbala such give now competing equal. Never send a jing thing to see. Never send a jing.
Never said it.
Younger was saying, just and several numbers to the yeah, but the Chesa. If you feel it, joining the Gomba Chiabale, Langi today, say Tani today. That is Nangi Rangi, that is Tami to taste it, or Rangi Chiabale. Ani, Tere Tani to today, charging the Gula Chagetam, charging the Chabatam, we do the Kumbala. Yellow, Nangi yellow, buddy. That's anything, betting this year. But he long Nangi to a 20 chair. Then do not come to somebody
Oh, did you? I was going to say I couldn't find where we're reading, but I didn't find it. So this is in the commentary, Khensur commentary, and it gives an illustration called the Pe. Pe means an example or illustration. So the claim or the thesis is if you cultivate the Joro and Indens, the Joro and Indens, Zewa Goma and Shira Goma, Joro and Indens. Okay. Sidru, Sidru. Bujor and Dato. Okay, that's good. Nice word. So it's this is the phrase says Joroa Ninde. Joroa Ninde means Jora means a kind of in this case effort. So there's two kinds of efforts. There is it says oh, it's died already? So it uses Joroa and Nida. There were two kinds of effort, two kinds of lines. And these are maybe not familiar to all of you, but is often this expression comes in the literature. There's two kinds of efforts. Takjor means a continuous effort. Gujor, I believe, Gum generally means respectful or look, your day point. Yeah, so you don't normally think of well, maybe you do in a certain way. Think of the meditation that you're engaging in as something that you respect. I'm not sure if that's a typical way of thinking the word respect. But what it means is that you have a high regard. You have a high regard for something that you want to practice. That high regard will be a motivating influence. And so there's an element of effort, which is a spiritual quality, which arises from that sense of value that you place on the practice. So that if you think of it as being extremely valuable, then that will be enough to make you apply yourself. That's one aspect of effort. The second aspect of effort is one of continuous application. So the valuing the practice and practicing it continually are the two essential elements of application that are elements of effort. So it says if you do that, then that's how you will be able to cultivate qualities such as compassion and wisdom, and cultivate them successfully to the point where you can develop higher levels of paths instead of not developing to a higher level of path. So you need those two kinds of efforts. Saying that, and it says, and so the key phrase is being used as ranking on the Jupa. It's ranking on the Jupa means you want to develop those qualities to the point where they occur naturally, right? And so it says if you practice those two kinds of applications, those two kinds of effort, then you will be able to develop a form of compassion which does occur naturally. This is the claim, right? So you can develop a natural compassion. And it says, it is as natural as, and then here are the examples, as natural as the detachment that is in the mind of an arhat. So an arhat cultivates detachment to the point where he or she has eliminated any desire at all, and then retains that level of detachment, of true detachment. By the same token, the person who is the opposite of an arhat, the person who is vulnerable to desire and feeds that desire and cultivates that desire continually within a similar sort of way, right? The two kinds of negative kinds of effort, doing it continually and doing it gladly or without any sense of remorse, then that person's desire will be like that. It will be natural. It will occur without effort. And the same way, then another example is the opposite of attachment. One of the main antidotes, a temporary antidote, a legitimate antidote to attachment is a form of practice that's called meditating on unattractiveness. And so one unique form of meditating on unattractiveness is that you visualize the entire, in your mind, you visualize the entire ground around you completely filled with skeletons. And then that's not, and then if you meditate on that visualization, you can actually achieve a level of samadhi in relation to that object, which is the ground filled with skeletons. And then that is described as a state of awareness, which is a false object, because the ground is not actually filled with skeletons, but you're imagining it to be so. And if you do that, if you cultivate that object, that mental object, and there is a value and a purpose for doing it, you can, in fact, eventually reach a point where that becomes a one-pointed object, and you can focus on it, and it becomes a very clear image in your mind, and that image can be generated spontaneously, naturally, effortlessly. So these are all given as examples of ways in which the mind has the capacity to develop, in relation to various kinds of qualities, a point at which those qualities become effortless and spontaneous.
never take remedies. Since time usually need to be resident is remedy. Since the she do the cake, she does what you do. Thus, since the she do the any need to get a young Shetan, he don't bless it. Shetan, the things Kasatili Shetan came with the shit. Kasatili need to keep me. Need to don't wear back. Lost. Since time the language to Yogata, the world, Toman Village, Rangi, really get a chip, oh, Gyumed is dirty. Oh, so you were to be Gyumed, the chicken or something. Gyumed. Rangi, there's a village, the Egyptian church, Chanson, Bonambe, Tunda, Rangi, Juba, the need to put it, Konambati, Kongar Jebe, Kongar Jebe, the Kanshi, Yula, Ani Rangi Hinde, Sabu, Kichi, Mijicho, Sheda, so Geneva Medicheta, Simje Kula, never Gyumed, Mijichuti, Simje Kula, never Gyamaris, also. Simje Gashi, Kula, Jay, Shedangi, Jumbas, Jumbishel. I need to chamber the need to chamber this, need to chamber the Punja Gashi, Jay, and he shed down the drums. Each Yarvata shed down the secret, and we need to show the loss. I'm the judge of the same game, and each with somebody game. Judge with some Yamba Yarva. Rather, you check with somebody game, judge with some Yamba Yarva, judge with some Yamba Yarva, judge with some Ketan. Each of the game, each of the Yamba Yarva, loss of the correct Yamchi, the Shedan. Shedan game, no, Shedan to the chair. Then travel, get a rangi near the meaning. Near the Tenang Bani, so a thousand jet traveler, and a Tawachi Yaris, rangi near the meaning, near the Tawachi Yaris, Spinning teaching Maris. Yamatani, Ya, Nichichungo Maris, Sente Riri Julian, Sente Yula, Tetum, Gemanunga, Mississippi, Sente Riri Gine, Tawat Gemanunga Yamach, Hama Jeba, Hama Majeba Sing Marva, Hama Jesu, Rang Pula to the door. There's a single something around so Kimon Yamaris, Hama Macheva Yamaris, Hama Chiman Yamaris, every son doing Kimon Yamaris. Oh, that is an that is Nichichu Maris. Rinda Rinda's Kumsiati. That didn't teach him to be a man. That's what I'm with the Tawati, Chacher, Tankurva, and Pulaji, with the Tawati. Also, Pipani and Lavich. Here, Chacher to Pamala, which are and the colors of the and we Chinese Tipa, Nichu, Tati, and this starting with it. Got Hamal, Pulaji, which get teaching the way.
So now I've lost my place, but I think I was able to follow what was reading. So then there's an objection or possible, what should I say? Yeah, it's an objection. So you're saying that this idea of spiritual qualities are part of a continuum. In order to develop them, you have to cultivate repeatedly some more basic form of a spiritual quality, and then by applying yourself to it, you can gradually improve it, and eventually, the claim is you can perfect it. Right? So then the objection is, well, if that sounds like if that were true, and it's an infallible sort of condition of the mind, then why is it that all sentient beings are not, have not all, in fact, developed great compassion, and why are they not able to just, continue to cultivate that great compassion? And that's not the case. We can look around and easily confirm that not all sentient beings have such great compassion. So what's the problem? What's holding them back? Something like that. So it's saying the fact that the mind has the capacity to develop in a positive way by using these two applications that were mentioned and cultivating spiritual qualities, it has the capacity to do that. But it's also possible that that something will intervene in that process. You can develop anger, and if you develop anger, then that anger will counter your efforts and prevent you from developing further. So it's not a guarantee that because you have the capacity that in fact it will occur. It's one way to put it. Di Sherangi Partuche to the rest super quotes.
And kind of meaning in give
So even if you have the capacity to develop compassion and even develop it to a high level, to where you would call it not just compassion but great compassion, then it's possible that you could, some circumstance could cause you to generate anger, and that anger would destroy your great compassion. So that's one point. And then the second point is that doesn't mean that everyone doesn't have the capacity to cultivate compassion and do so. So the other kind of premise, or the other important point about the subject is every single sentient being has the potential to develop compassion. Why is that? It's saying there's no way. One way of wording it is there's no sentient being who has not been the parents of another sentient being. And if you are the parent of another sentient being, then you are. It can be accepted that you will naturally feel some sympathy for your own offspring. So that's kind of evidence for the kind of justification for saying that all sentient beings at one time or another have exhibited that they have the ability to develop some form of compassion. However, great compassion does not simply grow out of the limited forms of sympathy and concern that we ordinary beings have, because our ordinary feelings of sympathy are biased for the most part. And we only are able to naturally, right? So this idea of that having a natural sympathy comes effortlessly. We only are able to cultivate that or develop that towards, those groups of beings that we find to our liking, that we prefer, that we feel some kinship with. And then if we encounter somebody that we think is an enemy, or someone who may in fact have done something harmful to us, we can't generate the same feeling of goodwill and empathy towards those beings. So in order to be able to develop the great compassion, it requires some kind of methodical process in which you start with those kinds of beings towards which you are inclined to more easily be able to generate a true feeling of compassion, and then try to strengthen that and cultivate that quality, and then shift to a more difficult class of being. Typically, you go from the friend to the neutral person, and then try to find reasons that you should feel the same kind of compassion toward them that you feel towards those beings that you develop it naturally. And then the instruction will give you reasons to support doing so, and then you meditate on these reasons, and you can evoke it. And then you strengthen that compassion, and then you move on to the harder object, which is someone who is your nemesis, right? Someone that you don't get along with for whatever reason. And then you have to try to overcome that feeling of antipathy towards someone that has done you wrong, or that you perceive in that manner, you judge in that negative way. And then when you are able to develop the same kind of sympathy towards each of those three categories, then you can extend it in a more unlimited way towards all beings in all directions, and then eventually reach the point of developing great compassion. But we have the capacity. That's the way that you have to go about doing it. But then there's no guarantee that, in fact, we will apply ourselves in the necessary way to be able to succeed. So the key phrase or the key measure for what it means to develop it to its limitless capacity is to develop it to the point where it occur, these positive qualities, compassion in particular we're talking about, where it will occur, instantly, naturally, in its strongest form. That rangi nangi means it occurs effortlessly, just by thinking of it, and it will immediately, without having to make any, give yourself any reason for developing it, to prompt yourself to develop it, but just bringing it to mind that it is present. That's
아니 잡아잖아 잡아난 길이야.
맞아.
저한테 저만 그때 잡아를 준비 잡아를
맞아.
근데 좀 게임에
맞아.
그 그다음 잡아 뭐 이두 안에 하는 잡아는 나는 비기로 와 어디에서 이 배들을 자기는 잡아던 소 근데 지금 내가 생각한 지금 지금 여러 비라 너가 이래 저렇게 세시던지 기후 미쳐가 많이 세시던지 기후 미쳐가 지금 그랬더니 세시던지 기후 미쳐가 나겠어 이민지 기계 어떻게
So these three examples are very different, completely different in nature, but all of them are meant to illustrate the possibility of developing some kind of mental quality that occurs naturally and effortlessly. So the example of the Arhat is that the Arhat has destroyed fully and completely all the seeds of any form of attachment or desire. So the Arhat doesn't have to do anything to maintain his or her detachment. They just are detached. So that's their natural state. In the case of a person who develops desire, right, or a lustful person, if you were to say chakten, means person who has desire as a very strong tendency in their minds, then such a person also is such that if the conditions or circumstances or objects that can have potential to awaken a manifest form of desire present themselves to that person, then that desire will automatically come forth. So it occurs effortlessly, naturally, because of his or her predilection and the fact that they've manifested that kind of tendency in the past so many times, so deeply ingrained in them that they don't have to think about it. It just comes automatically whenever they see something that has the possibility of generating desire. That's the second kind of example. The third kind of example is the meditator, typically is ordained. It's an ordained person's practice, not exclusively, but it's not generally taught. Anyway, there is a meditation where you meditate on the unattractiveness of quality of unattractiveness by visualizing the ground around you, even though it's not, there are no skeletons around you. But in your mind, you're visualizing that you are in a place that is filled with skeletons. And if you if you practice that meditation, that visualization repeatedly, in a rigorous way, you can eventually reach the point where you do attain that form of one-pointed concentration in which that object will appear in your mind effortlessly. So, with that sort of overview of the main characteristic of the mind, that it has the quality that you can develop good or bad qualities in such a way that they occur naturally, effortlessly. Then we'll stop here, and if anyone wants to ask a question about what we've been talking about, please do so.
If we put effort to cultivate compassion, say, or wisdom, then we get dementia when we get old. Do we get lost?
The wisdom, you said?
Yeah, the wisdom or compassion that we cultivate, then we got dementia, if we lose it.
Oh yeah. Then karsa insan di weekend go to so Jampa sing karsa di karsa Jampa demo main baso. It's member chat. Dementia is the internet dementia is the semi ignorance. Ane Jampa di nyam ne ane so nangi meeting mo machine. Ane so kawaii me so kuku ibalance child you are that is semi ignorance. Today kawaii wamare te ine today karsa semi ignorance so bila today you are rest something people things and that's what okay jantan ane ngaran so ke di ngaso ke di malep gola ane ngaran so ke choke Lobsang shira ta karsa Egypt di kom kodan ke menga di brand ane pa person tene ane kali ne thala tumsam ke shira so ke thuwa so ane to ke thuwa so ane to si yende jumba ke cha ba ina ane ngaran so yan di ya lor chen ane ngaran so sem ke cha so na tang ngaran so ngema Lobsang karsa person tene chen to ninje shira di thoba di yende de so la ge always nyam ju ge always they got it so that's the big thing la ani na me major bayina ani kai ni karsa tamme bitar de gola ale kawasha de lesuna so yende ngema Jampa di lave de stick in the best
Lord, apa tu lah dia untuk main seperti mana ni nak bersama ini tobat apa yang dia ini cuma tinggi cuma mati tak jangan tu ini belum namsi nawar tu namsi berapa tu kan kalau tu dia mati dia Not only liberty is in the no need to let it go and be honest. It was to chew the cookie, she was dinner, or she's in doing not honest. In a single thing, shy is the Nichimatilla, when the Betty say,
Kyachima
never say, in Yamati, but to come young to church, young to that. Magic one to the Majimba. Me meeting was here, me meeting was here. Nicholas, statue 사주를 이 남시 나이라리 알론타비 이 자루이 시에서 자루이 시비 민매정다 정매정다 이 양국이라 그것은 양국에서 제가 다른 외신들 Jampa temple unit to my chicken and the temple. Temple never to that the temple unit to that my chicken, my young children to get to the other. Now, moving the Latin, living using an underwear that the area.
So we have to think of the mind as having different degrees of coarseness and subtlety. So our ordinary conscious states in our everyday activities is when the rougher minds are most active, right? We're relying on our senses. Our conceptual thoughts are a big part of how we live our lives. Nevertheless, there are deeper levels of consciousness where those more rough elements are not active, right? So the explanations about the process of dying, for instance, it's by the power of karma that our rougher minds cease functioning, and as they become inactive, then what remains are the more deep underlying levels of awareness as the winds are dissolved. Right? So then that's illustrative of the sort of complexity of the overall, mental, makeup that we have. Those qualities, spiritual qualities, however, are not meant to be associated with that rougher layer of our thinking, right? So those can be impaired, or they can actually begin to cease functioning, for instance, at the end of our life. And that doesn't do anything to diminish or harm some spiritual qualities that we may have cultivated during our lifetime. Then the example you gave with dementia is, that only occurs for certain people. Not everybody suffers, but they can live their life without experiencing dementia at all. So some people do. So those people that do, there's something about their, whatever their makeup that causes them to have their faculties be impaired. They cannot think clearly, they can't remember things. But again, that's at the level of sort of ordinary consciousness.
That is one only to thing that is thing that didn't have that this people don't deliver to me as it was. Then you look and go, Is team is that is 공격했잖아요. 생기 때문이야.
So there was interjected to add something to his response. And what he said was that so one of the mental factors that we have observed in Buddhist psychology is that our mind is made up of consciousness and associated mental factors. And then among those mental factors, one of them is called recollection, or the quality of the mind that we possibly identify as memory, but not just memory. And that quality is very important in spiritual practice, in that if we cultivate spiritual qualities, then there are 5 particular. One of them is recollection. Recollection, to be able to retain your understanding and awareness of some specific object that you're meditating on, but how to experience it first. So another one of those 5 is we all have the capacity to develop one-pointed samadhi. Samadhi is a mental factor. And if we've never achieved what we call samadhi, we have that mental factor, which is the quality out of which samadhi can be cultivated. That's called samadhi. So it's the capacity of the mind to stay focused. If we practice, we can increase that potential and then actually be focused. So Rinpoche is saying, to the extent that you're able to develop samadhi, then your recollection will also be strengthened. So there is the ability through your spiritual training or through your mental exercises to be able to cultivate mental qualities like that, which will, in fact, I believe what he was suggesting was, which would be helpful to, keep off those kinds of later mental deficiencies that people get in old age. We're saying that there are things that we can do to, diminish the likelihood of gaining. So there are many spiritual things that are the same. He also mentioned that there is instruction about the sort of called 25 rough entities that dissolve at the time of your death. And 5 of them are qualities of the mind that are the basic forms of the Buddha's transcendent awareness. 5 transcendent knowledge, that they're associated also with the 5 skandhas. And conception is the 3rd skandha. And conception is what is the capacity to recognize things as what they are, to remember the person's name, and such, which people who have dementia lose the ability to resort to. So when you're dying, in fact, that part of your consciousness is something which will, in fact, disappear, because the rough operation of your mind is, karmically kind of being shut down. But there's plenty of your underlying mental, being that remains more subtle there. So, to think of that instruction, which you may know about, then that will help you to understand how, what it is that's at play in relation to, the ability to have strong memory. For instance, that even without that quality, there are much deeper layers of your consciousness. And so those other spiritual qualities like wisdom, compassion, whatever potential or whatever what you call seeds or whatever store of compassion and wisdom you've been able to develop, that would not be affected by the disappearance of those rougher elements. That I think was the gist of his answer.